Handheld gaming is vastly underappreciated. In a world where companies are offering pre-order bonuses, backwards compatibility, gimmick after gimmick after gimmick, an awful lot can be achieved by just being able to take your adventures with you.
Which is why when the Game Boy came out in 1989 it absolutely flew off the shelves. Nintendo gave America 1 million copies to play with and they were sold out of it in a few weeks. As gaming began to surge in popularity, the Game Boy let you take gaming with you wherever you went. By the time it was discontinued in 2003, its various iterations had sold 118 million copies and changed the face of handheld gaming forever. So, how do you follow that? Better hardware helps, that's for sure. The Game Boy Advance may lack the impact that the Game Boy had, but it's capable of so much more. 8-bit became 32-bit. A 2.6-inch screen became 2.9 inches with much better resolution. Game cartridges could hold up to 32 times more data. And dude, it was even backwards compatible with all the Game Boy games. Nintendo knew they had something special here, and so they threw all their best IPs at it, resulting in some truly outstanding games. Quite a lot of franchises can look back to the GBA era and find some of their greatest highlights here. How the fuck I managed to narrow it down to 5 is beyond me. Must have taken a lot of bacon. When you're trying out new things within your franchise, I reckon it helps if you introduce this new idea on a handheld. Put it this way, most console games require a bit of time put aside to play it. You've got to make a conscious decision to switch on a TV, put the game disc in the machine and sit down for a bit and experience something that you might not enjoy as much as you'd like. With a handheld, you might whip it out on a bus or on a random bench and waste some time with it. You might even have more fun if it's the only thing to stave off the boredom. Which is fantastic because Mario & Luigi Superstar Saga is a ridiculously funny game.
Mario games for the longest time had charm in abundance. They're very heartwarming, very endearing. It's what you get with cartoony graphics and an ultimately satisfying conclusion. But you would be stretching it quite far if you said they were funny for any period of time. Which is a claim and a statement that Superstar Saga put to the test.
I could talk about this game until the end of time for its significance as a GBA game, it's important for keeping the momentum going after the success of Super Mario RPG and Paper Mario, and the fact that it's just so damn funny. Quite a lot of games and even more RPGs try and suck you into their world with sweeping bits of exposition about how interesting everything is and why you should care. Superstar Saga, on the other hand, is a beautiful blend of satire and actual substance. A genuinely great RPG that can help introduce newcomers to the genre, and yet with enough quirks to keep seasoned veterans entertained. Seriously, just spend 5 minutes listening to Foreful, and I'm sure you'll find something to keep you interested. The plot's not that complicated, especially when you compare it to the RPG norm, but that only serves to make it more accessible. Something that Mario games in general have always been very good at. The success of Superstar Saga allowed Nintendo the opportunity to expand on this idea in later Mario & Luigi titles, but for now, this'll do just fine.
Historically, Nintendo, Capcom mixed levels of success when they work together. For every Mega Man and Ryu in Smash Bros. 4, there's the Capcom 5 back in the days of the GameCube. So when Capcom is given one of Nintendo's biggest IPs to play with, you would just kind of start to worry a little bit. Frankly, though, we needn't have worried.
Because Capcom sure knew how to make a great Zelda game. Oracle of Ages and Seasons are very fun but suffer a bit from being mightily similar to Link's Awakening, at which point there's no contest. But with a better understanding of what they want to do with a Zelda game, Capcom gave it another go from the ground up. No copying engines from previous games. What we ended up with was Legend of Zelda Minish Cap, a fully original, vastly improved handheld Zelda game, except this time you're not playing around with time or seasons or wind direction. Now we're playing with matter. Making Link small changes the basics of exploring something in Zelda. While other Zelda games had you changing your environment to alter the challenges in front of you, Minish Cap shrinks you down to a couple of pixels, changing you rather than your surroundings. You're no longer the constant in all these challenges you're facing, and I think that adds an extra dynamic to quite a lot of what you do in the game. Even away from that, it's still a very solid game. It takes its graphical style from Wind Waker, but the more important part of that is how fleshed out the sprite work is. It's more than everything looking a bit more cartoony, and perhaps you come to expect that from a GBA game, but the extra detail, like how the Dark Nuts move around when you fight them, really add to the fluidity of your adventure. You can even roll around, and trust me, that's a pretty fucking big deal. The GBA might have been a leap forward in terms of technical capabilities from the original Game Boy, but that doesn't mean that it was able to do everything you could ever want it to do. If you're looking for strict RPGs, so no tactical games like Fire Emblem or Advance Wars, or more adventure-y titles like Zelda, you're really left with only a few options. There's Superstar Saga like I mentioned earlier, there's Pokemon, like I'll mention in a bit, there's various Final Fantasy games, most of which are remakes anyway, there's Mother 3 which, hands up, who actually played that on a GBA, and then maybe Kingdom Hearts if you're stretching it a bit. It's not that you're in short supply for RPGs, but for something to go on this list, it doesn't leave me with many options. That is if we're going to casually forget about Golden Sun. Probably shouldn't do that. When you talk about how far graphically the GBA is ahead of the Game Boy, Golden Sun has to be one of the biggest and best examples of just how spectacular a GBA game can be. It's a feat made even more incredible when you see that this is a collaboration between Nintendo and Camelot, those nutjobs behind a lot of the Mario sports games. This time there's less of Wario and Waluigi running around causing chaos, and more of quintessential RPG goodness to immerse yourself in. It takes a fair old while before you can get into the meat of the game, but let's face it, you get that with most RPGs, along with the whole walk around, random battle, beat some bad guys, walk around, random battle, etc. On a base level, it isn't too strongly removed from the RPG recipe. Having said that, the staggering thing about Golden Sun, with its incredible particle effects and unbelievable longevity, is how insanely polished this game is. Really, if you're after a GBA RPG which hasn't got the Final Fantasy name plastered all over the front, Golden Sun is just about as good as it gets, and it can fit in your pocket.
Now you see, that's the problem, not the fact that it can fit in your pocket, the fact that it hasn't got Final Fantasy on the front, because if it did, there would be people lining up down the streets, they would love it, they'll be wanting to buy the 7th game of this very successful series. Instead, we've got a very good, slightly underrated series, which Nintendo hasn't used properly. There's only like 2 games there. There should be a new one. Fucking potential. Use it.
Another week, another top 5, another opportunity to gush over the merits of the 3rd generation of Pokemon games. How it threw Pokemon further forward in one go than any new games before or after. They might not be the greatest Pokemon games ever, frankly at least half of that is up to personal preference and a heavy dose of nostalgia, but apart from Pokemon Red, Blue and Yellow, you could make a strong argument that Pokemon Ruby and Sapphire were the most important games in the series.
By the 3rd generation of Pokemon, you start to see patterns in how the games are released. You have the main 2 games, and then the 3rd game with a couple of improvements. So we had Red, Blue, and then Yellow with improvements. We had Gold, Silver, and then Crystal with some more improvements. We had Ruby, Sapphire, and then we got Emerald.
Hard to say that Pokemon Emerald did anything radically different to Ruby and Sapphire. Any improvements that are made are very slight. In fact, you could argue that it's maybe not worth purchasing if you played Ruby or Sapphire, because the experience isn't that much different. Except you have to remember with all these additional games, the Diamonds, the Black and White 2s, and whatever happens with X and Y, they're like a director's cut. Not too many drastic changes if you ignore being able to catch Kyogre and Groudon in the same game, and oh, you know, the Battle Frontier. But enough small additions to make it very worth your time. It's the sort of game you play where you constantly point out the new add-ons and wonder why they didn't make it into Ruby and Sapphire. It's a strange situation where you'll probably enjoy it more if you haven't played the previous games, but one where you'll understand just how much was changed from Ruby and Sapphire if you know those games inside out. Besides, who doesn't want to play a game with this guy as its mascot? When you've got the choice between a whale, a red spiky dragon, and a so fucking metal! It's a difficult choice we must all make at some point in our lives. When there's praise in this video, it's usually been when the game has done something unexpected, in a good way. It's not very often that you see a game push a console to its limits and end up being a bad game. Whether because they're actually really great or because we just love a good pioneer, but my point is that effort and maybe a bit of left field thinking doesn't usually go unrewarded. When you have to make a 2D Metroid game after the success of Super Metroid, you can't just reheat what you made earlier. People will point it out and probably complain about it. But no one, not even the most diehard of Metroid fans, could have seen Metroid Fusion coming.
Metroid games are always a little bit unnerving, either because of a fear of the unknown, or because some areas are supposed to be scary, you're supposed to fear them. Metroid Fusion as a whole game fits quite snugly between the two.
Behold, spectators! The two different ways you can creep someone played pretty much perfectly. Except the headline here is made by both being in the form of a Metroid game, not exactly the go-to places for consistent scares, and even more interestingly, on a fucking Game Boy Advance game. Metroid Fusion is a vastly unsettling game, more so than in previous Metroid games because of two reasons. One, your entire environment feels hostile. From the beginning to the very end, it always feels like something horrendous is waiting in the next room. And two, the something horrendous is given a more physical form called the SAX, a mutated form of Samus which is far stronger and far more ruthless than anything you've got at your disposal. Happy hunting. Yet a common complaint levelled at Metroid Fusion is that it's far more linear than other Metroid games, and yes, it's certainly more closed off than, say, Super Metroid. But I doubt this was done by accident. When you've got less places to explore, your route through the game is bottlenecked. Practically a crime in any other Metroid game, but don't forget that you're on the run from a psycho parasite that's living inside your old power suit. I'm not sure if an open world horror game works, frankly that's a debate for another time, but by shrinking your options of places to go, you're also losing places to hide.
This has been RabbidLuigi, and previous Metroid games instilled a sense of fear in you by making you feel alone. You don't really know what's out there, and that in itself is quite scary. Metroid Fusion made it quite clear very early on what your biggest threat is during your adventure, how outmatched you are against it, and the fact that it could easily be waiting for you in the next room. That's fucking terrifying.
Want to have a say on what I talk about next week? Leave a top 5 suggestion in the comments section below and go follow me on Twitter, where later in the week I'll be compiling the best submissions and setting up a vote over there. Thanks for watching guys, and I'll see you in the next one. Hey guys, hope you like that. Starting to talk about the same games, or at least similar games in consecutive weeks, but don't worry, because I'm pretty sure that none of these games are going to make it on the next list. Having said that, the next topic is kind of up for grabs at the moment. The related straw poll is almost a dead heat between the two topics. So make sure you head over to Twitter or Facebook and impart your wisdom on this situation. Need it concluded at some point.